it's just not top of mind. Sitting down with your parent and asking them the stories of their lives, who they were before they were your parent, really getting to see them as people who were young once and had their own experiences and that shaped them, and culture was different when they were young. How did that shape them? It just is one of those things that we kind of have a vague interest in. Most of us have a vague interest or understanding in until something happens. And for me, that thing that happened was my mom broke her hip and femur. She's in her 70s in a parking garage. And she had always been really spry. And I never really had the thought that, oh, she could die very soon until that happened. And it really shook me. And I realized that while I felt like I knew her, there were so many vagaries to her life that I just not asked, and I would be left with these fading photographs and had she died, and no real knowledge of what her story was.
Welcome back to the AudioLife Podcast, where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host again today, Carrie Purcell. And today I have a very interesting guest for you. So he's interesting not just because he's a pro surfer or a fellow podcaster with over 400 episodes or an award-winning journalist. Those things are all pretty cool. But he is an author, and he's an author who probably more than most understands the mission of AudioLife Memoirs and what we're doing here today. So Kyle Thiermann has recently published his debut book. It blends witty narrative and practical advice, and it's called One Last Question Before You Go. And in it, he explores the art of interviewing his own parents. He writes that questions are invitations to see our parents in the present tense, and a declaration that we care about the wisdom of elders in a culture obsessed with youth. And if you know anything about AudioLife, that's what we're all about. That's really the basis of why we put this podcast out there, to learn and preserve the stories and the wisdom of our parents, of my co-founders' parents, of our elders. It's core to what we do. But independent to that, Kyle has gone ahead and published his book to help you do it yourself with your own family. So what are those questions? Maybe you're going to get some encouragement from him. Probably you're going to hear some tips. You're going to hear a lot of stories. I think we'll probably pull some of the stories out of the book and share those with you as well. But basically he's going to uncover the process of interviewing his parents for you. So that's all I'm going to start with. Kyle, it's good to see you. It's been a long time in the making to have this conversation.
So happy to be here. Yes, fellow obsessor of parental stories. It's always nice to find one of you.
First time somebody said it just that way, but there you go.
Yeah, why do we spend so much time thinking about our parents' past? And the punchline is it helps you get to know yourself better, as I'm sure you do.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. And again, there's, we know there are people out there that feel the way that we do. That's how this came about. But it's not something that everybody talks about a lot. It's not something everybody actually acts on or has any idea how to do, right?
Yeah. I think that interviewing your parents is a bit like investing, in the way that when you're young, you think, well, that's a long way away. Why would I need to start putting any money away? And what's an index fund? That seems kind of boring. I'm not interested in it. And then one day you realize, oh my God, this matters massively. Like this little habit, it's of money saving, adds up to something really great over time. And if you don't think about it early on, usually it's too late, by the time, you become old. And I think that interviewing your parents is a bit the same way, where it's just not top of mind. Sitting down with your parent and asking them the stories of their lives, who they were before they were your parent, really getting to see them as people who were young once and had their own experiences and that shaped them, and culture was different when they were young. How did that shape them? Like it just is one of those things that we kind of have a vague interest in. Most of us have a vague interest or understanding in until something happens, And for me, that thing that happened was my mom broke her hip and femur. She's in her 70s in a parking garage, and she had always been really spry, and I never really had the thought that she could die very soon until that happened, and it really shook me. And I realized that while I felt like I knew her, there were so many vagaries to her life that I just not asked, and I would be left with these fading photographs and had she died, and no real knowledge of what her story was. So that was what led me to start writing this book. I also have a background in journalism and as a podcaster, so I had the skills of being able to construct an interview and through that create beats to unravel a story. But I had never used that skill on my parents. So it started first as an interview project and then turned into a book.
Yeah. And so did you recorded some of the interviews or all of the interviews?
I recorded all of the interviews. So it was a year-long project. I interviewed my mom, my dad, and my stepdad about 3 times each. There were long-form interviews, and each of them focused on a different part of their life. I didn't try and get the whole life story in one go. But as an example, my dad was a magician when he was a kid, and I did a whole hour-long interview just on that passion of his. And that, for people who are interested in interviewing their parents, is something to keep in mind, because you're not actually trying to get their whole life story. That's impossible. You're trying to get a bit of the essence of them recorded. So moving beyond just the biographical stuff of, you did this and this and this, into the why. What is it that you're really passionate about? What were the things that really got you excited about life? Those are the stories that you're really going to want to pass down. My dad became student body vice president in high school by doing a magic show in front of his student body assembly, right? And he finished off his speech by having a dove fly out of his sleeve. Like, that sums him up, right? Like, you practically don't need to know anything else about my dad to know that that's the kind of guy he was. So those are the stories that have that I want to be able to pass down to my kids, right? And it really is not that hard, and for me, doing a few different interviews helped take the pressure off. It's like, hey, we're just going to get into the habit of sitting down with a recorder and asking you some questions. And that led to a lot of depth and closeness, and also, as well as, pain and disappointment, and ultimately a bit more mature look at who my parents are, which is just people, same as everyone else.
Yeah. Awesome start. I have lots of questions about the process on the book. I have lots of questions about you. I will share. I typically don't share much about me. I keep it on you, but I'll share just a tiny bit about sitting down with my mom. And my mom is like, I need to know everything and plan everything in advance. Give me every question. Let me get all my answers down. So I learned to do prep calls with her that were recorded. And eventually I got her to the point where I was like, hey, Mom, for this prep call, you might just want to brush your hair just in case we like what we talked about. But you're going to, I don't know. I don't know if you experienced that. I don't know if you've talked to other people that experience that.
Yeah, there's an argument for giving the questions beforehand and an argument against it. The argument for is that it can put your parents at ease. And the argument against it is that they can come with canned answers and start talking like fortune cookies, and you're like, wait, Mom, this is not how you really talk, right? You're not looking for those grandiose life lessons that you might see in an Instagram meme. Like, you're looking for who they are really. And for people who aren't professionally trained in media, it's easy to fall into a character, and that's the last thing that you want. So I tend to start most of my interviews with not just my parents, but with podcast guests by asking them about something that they know a great deal about or have a really good relationship with. Because most people, when they get on the other side of the mic, are afraid that they're going to sound stupid, not have the information that they need. And if you ask them about something easy, something that they care about, it tends to get them off on a good start. And that then can lead into permission to ask some of those harder questions. So that was that was my little trick that worked very well with all my parents. I ended up actually asking my parents to send photographs of their lives before the interview. And then I used those photos to prompt stories. I could just say, tell me the story of this photograph when you were, in Ireland when you were in your 20s. And then that prompts a story, really. Some of the best interviews I did were just 5 stories and that was it, right? So I found photographs to also be pretty helpful in that regard.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll just emphasize the idea that, we're looking for authenticity, right? And we're trying to actually just hear who people are. And it's, so that tip about putting them at ease, that tip about kind of staying in a realm of where they're just really comfortable and they're naturally going to talk, is great. Did you know that you were going to turn it into a book? Like, did it start with the idea that this will be a book, or was it really just about kind of uncovering those stories, kind of connecting on that level with your parents?
It started because I had my dad on my podcast, even before my mom did that, before my mom broke her hip. So I had my dad on my podcast. There was a lot of interest in that from listeners. And that was the initial spark that, hey, this could turn into something a little bit bigger. Then I initially was going to write a very just practical how-to book, which it is, it is a how-to book. You'll read it and learn how to interview your parents. But I felt throughout that process that I was kind of circumventing my own story a bit. And it wasn't fair to readers to just say, this is how you do it. And you're going to go do this incredibly scary thing where you could learn some fairly traumatic things about your parents, or at the very least, walk away feeling incredibly disappointed that your parents are not who you wish they could be. And I think that's the overwhelming, honest feeling that most people have about their parents is, man, I really wish they could have shown up for me better in this way, in that way, in that way. It's like, it's very rare that you have a perfect, great relationship with your parent. And, part of that is culture. Part of it is that when our parents were growing up, sunscreen was not invented, and right before them, it was horses and carriages. Like, culture has moved so fast over the last 60 years. The idea that we're going to see eye to eye with this person, have the same emotional toolkit, have the same verbal lexicon, like we just start talking past each other so often, and that leads to this sense of loneliness and longing. So that's the warning label that should go on the bottom of every potential interview with your parent. But there are a lot of things that are scary and come with risks that are very worth doing. And in my own case, my mom had fallen to a bunch of wild conspiracy theories over the past 10 years that caused us to have a very different understanding of what was happening in the world, and an inability to even talk with the same level of facts. We weren't even debating the same events, right? And that led to distance. And your parents might not have that exact thing, but chances are there is some sense of fractured landscape of reality between the two of you, whether it's political, ideological, the way their opinions on you raising your kids, whatever it is. But to get out of the mode of, well, I'm going to force my reality onto you, which is what we tend to do. We try to be defensive and argue for our reality. To get out of the need for that and to just simply ask questions and learn more about what may have caused this worldview to happen is very liberating, and can lead to a lot of empathy, which is ultimately, I think, what happened for me. And then, you asked the question, did this turn it, like, when did this turn into a book? On some level, as a writer and as a journalist, I know a good story when I see one, and to have a front row seat to a pretty large epidemic of baby boomers falling to conspiracy theories, and to be able to use that as a narrative device to draw a reader through a how-to book was when the idea clicked and when I really started going after it as a book-length project.
Got it. How did your parents feel about it being published as a book?
Well, they knew that it was going to be published as a book, so I told them throughout the process. And I think it speaks volumes to who they are as people that they were able to continue to get behind it. And it's obviously hard to, it's hard to have a writer tell their version of you if it's not your version of you. And good writers are not, they're not just telling the bright sunny side of their subjects, because those aren't real stories. The great writer Joan Didion said, you don't want to get sued, but your subjects should never send you a thank you letter. Because it should just be honest about your perspective about them when writing the book. And this is a different project than interviewing your parents. I don't think that you should interview your parents and have it be an adversarial conversation. I think that's just about you giving them their space. But if you want to write a book, no one's going to connect with that idea if there's not conflict and honesty in your own relationship. So I had to put that in there. And I also think I did my very best to have there be a good amount of humor and grace in their character development as well. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that my parents and I still have Thanksgiving together, and they were able to, with me, and they were able to, while they disagree, they still believe a lot of the conspiracy theories that I talk about in the book. They understand that our primary relationship can be bigger than just world events, which is the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about convincing your parents to do it with you. Mm-hmm. Just the interview in general. We've already talked about the fact that they knew that there would be a book, that, this was going to be a bigger story than just sitting down and talking to their son. There's another level to it, and I don't know your parents, so I don't know how they feel about it, right? But in your title, one last question before you go, there is that sense of urgency, right? I'm not going to be able to ask you this forever. It came from a real instance where, your mom won't be there forever. Not everybody, as they get older, likes to feel that they're
going to die.
Yeah. So I don't know how much that was part of it. I know you talk a little bit about, how their willingness to be involved in being interviewed. But talk to us a little bit about both sides of that, right? Convincing them on this bigger project, also just the fact that maybe we don't want to look at our mortality.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, do you find that that's a big issue with people who are trying to pitch their parents on it? That's the primary thing that comes up?
It's a big issue. Is it the primary one? I would say half the cases, rather than parents feeling like their story is going to be valued for their children, their grandchildren. They feel like, I'm not done yet. I don't have a story to tell. Why are you making me think that I'm at that stage of my life?
Right. Yeah. We all want to feel like we're a little younger than we actually are. The things, I'll tell you what, some tactical approaches that really helped me get yeses, and you can think you can use this for a variety of pitches, but it works with parents. One is to say, I'm working on this project and I'd love you to be part of the project. It takes the pressure off the whole thing just being about them. Like, I'd like to get yours. It's like, no, I'm doing this, a project with, maybe it's with my dad, maybe it's with my mom, maybe it's with my aunt and uncles, brothers and sisters. And I want to have you be a part of that. That can be very useful from a tactical standpoint. And especially, there's a reason why product websites have testimonials, because it makes it feel like someone else has already done it. So if you can get a parent that's more likely to do it first and then say, well, my Uncle John did it, and would you be willing to do that too? It makes it feel like it's not a project that is about getting their final story or they're going to die. So it's just like, oh no, this is fun, this is light. And you're going to get the best material out of them if they don't feel like there's this sense of finality and, the Grim Reaper standing behind their microphone. So that was really helpful. Another was to say, I'd love to do a series of short interviews with you. It's not just one. You don't need to get it all in one go. Let's do a few. Let's talk. And also to say, I'd love to ask you in the call. Say, I'd love to ask you about your time in college. I realize I've never asked you about that. That specificity gives them a chance to build a story. Oh yeah, I can tell you about college. That doesn't seem like a big deal. Great. Does January 7th work? Wonderful. You have a date in mind so that they then can say yes. I mean, this is really we're talking about a sales pitch right now. Yeah. Right. And to learn how to pitch your parents on this, like, for a great cause is, you gotta think through strategy, right? So great. I'll be there January 7th. I'll bring the audio gear. Can you send me some photos of your life so that I have that? That's going to jog their memory. All that kind of stuff can really help. It can really help them not feel the pressure to have it be like one big last interview. Some people, this is with guys especially, guys have a hard time looking their dads in the eye often because there's some kind of confrontational aspect to it. I recommend just do the interview in the car, pull out a phone and do it between the two while you're driving. There's a reason why guys open up to each other in cars usually is because they're not looking each other in the eye. So if that's all you're going to get, like, do it in the car and see where that takes you. Plenty of ways to do it.
Really good tip. Yeah. Okay, those are awesome. What did you find the most challenging part of the process for you?
The most challenging part of the process for me was there was two, and I'll take this question in two different directions. The first was the most challenging part of the interview, which is the reality that my parents and I don't see eye to eye on a very deep level. Like that was something that I suspected for a while, but to really be like, wow, we've been consuming such different media for so long, and that has polluted and from my view, and they think I'm brainwashed too, but that's polluted your brain to such a degree that we are miles away from each other in terms of what we believe to be true about the world. And that's incredibly painful to come face to face with. From a writing standpoint, the most challenging aspect of the project was to continue to go through iterations of the draft and have the book turn into, need to go through many different shape-shifting exercises until the final product. Because with any creative project, it's easy to have a vision of what it's going to be and then get attached to that vision and then have evidence be pointing toward moving in a certain direction away from that initial vision, and to need to deal with, when am I not being true to myself and losing this initial soul of the project, and when am I being humble enough to realize that this is actually the best way to go, and move the book where it needs to go to be the best possible iteration that it can be, and to really take that feedback from trusted sources and editors. And when they tell you to do something, when you're really close to a project, it's a little bit like being drunk, where you don't know that you're drunk. And as the saying goes, if enough people tell you you're drunk, it might be time to sit down. Like, you need to trust certain people, while also trusting yourself. And that is a really difficult signal to navigate throughout a creative process.
Yeah. Yeah. What were, so just going back, not the writing process, but going back to the interview process, what were some of the surprises, favorite stories that came out?
Yeah, lots. And I mean, we tend to not give culture the credit that it deserves in the way that it shapes our personalities. We are massively shaped by this cultural weather system called culture. And that weather system is changing all the time. And it can be a real window into why we are the way we are. My mom grew up in the 1960s. She was in college during the Reagan administration, Vietnam War, hippies in Haight-Ashbury going to Berkeley College. It was a massively confrontational time with the establishment. And it was one of the first times, in recent history, where there was this massive youth uprising in women's rights, in civil rights, in experimentation with psychedelics, which allows people to see the world in very different ways, a distrust of authority. And that cultural attitude shaped her psychology in various ways. And for me, asking not just about what she was doing at that time for life, but what culture was doing at that time for life, really gave a window into who she is. And also, it's a bit of a time machine experience where you get to ask for an hour about what it was like in the 1960s and 70s. And that's just very fun. How often are we thinking about what America was like 50 years ago? So I really, really enjoyed asking specifically about culture.
Cool. Your parents are characters, if I'm allowed to say that. So there are like a lot of good stories. Now I understand there are challenges, right? There's generational divide, there's cultural divide, there's just life philosophy and belief systems that can be, as you said, really hard to validate that what you thought might be the case, that you really like that there's a big divide there, was actually the case, right? That from a kind of a meta outside childhood perspective, like that piece is really hard. But then your parents also have some like wild things that they've done and experienced. Like, did you already know that? Was that new? Was that any surprises there?
Yeah, I mean, there were lots, and as an example, I didn't know that that my I didn't really know about what it was like growing up in Hollywood. For my mom as a kid, her dad was a big PR guy, and just to understand the world of celebrity and the world of fame that she grew up in was something that I'd never really asked about. I didn't know how that had shaped her. I mean, she really took the opposite approach to that and said, I do not want to just rely on being beautiful my whole life. Like, I need to get smart. I need to get away from this celebrity culture, but to understand that that was what, that was the magnet that pushed her away from LA, was quite interesting for me. And yeah, just very, very elucidating. When she was younger, she started a homeless teen center in Santa Cruz, California. It was one of the first homeless teen centers in the country. And I asked what got you into that. She said, when I was a kid, I would go get ice cream down the street from my house, and there was this war veteran who was homeless named Ernie, and he just lived kind of below this tire shop. And she would talk to him, and sometimes she would like get him an ice cream. And she was 9-year-old girl talking to this homeless guy. And I think that those early experiences of interacting with people who are in different classes than us, interacting with people who are in have different socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds can be incredibly helpful, for us later in life. So to see like, oh, why did you get into working on the homeless issue when you were older, gave me a window into her reason for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. What were you, when you started the project with your parents in particular, what were you hoping to find or learn?
I think that I was looking to learn a bit more. When it comes to my mom and stepdad, it was like, who are you beyond these beliefs that you have that are very different from my own? And can I deepen my understanding of who you are as a person? Because, what we believe about politics in the world is just one small sliver of our personalities. With my dad, I think that he's very charismatic, funny guy, and also a bit all over the place. So just to pin him down and get him to sit for an hour and talk, I think he was a goal of mine. Just, hey, sit down and get some stories told was what I was looking to get out of that. And again, like I saw from a perspective of interest that other people wanted to interview their parents. So I was using myself a bit as a guinea pig and thinking, okay, what would other people maybe want to learn about their parents, and how can I test this out to, see how it goes for me, and then I can impart some of that wisdom.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Okay. Let's shift into some questions about you. We might come back into the book. We might come back into other projects. But let's get to know you a little bit more. So you have a podcast out there that people might have listened to. There's tons of episodes. You've done things that people have seen and heard. I'm going to throw a series of questions at you. I don't know where you're going to go with them, so just whatever comes to mind.
Love it.
Can you share a life lesson that you've learned the hard way?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is that fame on any level is not an excuse to not work hard. I'm not super famous or anything, but I have micro levels of recognition in certain areas, and I think that when you get recognized for something, it can make you feel like you get a pass to not work as hard in a real job, because people can be impressed with some level of like, ooh, cool, you did that thing, and that wears off real fast and gets super old. And I think that generally any level of recognition when you're young is not healthy, because it just makes you feel like you should be special and be in the spotlight all the time, rather than what a real career is all about, which is like grinding, and it's often thankless for months or even years at a time, and then you have a really big win. So I think that when I was younger, I got a lot of attention for doing some things that was impressive to people, and I've then had experiences in job environments where I've let people down because I had some bad habits of just not working as hard as I should because I felt like I could.
Yeah. 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 You've had such success that it's almost like you have to touch failure to realize you can't just coast. Like you've got to actually find that balance of what you put into it, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you, also, being a big fish in a small pond is really easy these days. And that small pond could be your Instagram, right? You could just feel kind of famous for having a few thousand followers, and that can lead to an erosion of certain ethics. I'm just like working hard and learning new skills and being at the bottom of the totem pole, in a sense. As a pro surfer, a lot of pro surfers have a bit of that child actor syndrome, where you have this incredibly lavish and romanticized life in your teens, and then you don't learn the skills you need to be able to operate within a 9 to 5. So there's a bit of a coming down from that, but also, the benefit of it is you can see that you don't actually need to work a 9 to 5 if you can figure something else out that's smart. A lot of people just settle for what they're given, and that can be an issue too, right? They don't argue for their worth. And I think that one thing I'm grateful for is that I have had a chance to work regular jobs now and see what it is that I'm good at, where I can provide value, and what is just, a waste of time. So I feel like I'm in a better spot now at 36, but it's taken some time.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like this question that might lead into this next question. So how do you personally balance professional ambition with personal happiness?
I focus on process. I mean, that's the short answer. If I, I do best in fifth gear. That's how I'm happiest in fifth gear. Like being busy, working on things that I care about. Like, to me, there's work that isn't like, oh my God, that's my passion exactly. But like, I'm thankful to say that like the work that I do going into, what I do in the creative field, like I like it. Like I'm stoked on it. I'm thinking about it after 5 o'clock. And, so I've never been in that like clock in, clock out mindset. That's just not the way that I'm wired. Where I can get into trouble is when I am only comparing up in my career. So I'm looking at authors that are more successful than me. I'm looking at podcasters. I'm looking at just people that are doing things that I want to do, but they're just doing it at a higher level or have more recognition. And you'll be reminded of that every time you look at your Amazon reviews or your Instagram followers or your bank account. There really is a number that you can attach self-worth to in so many aspects of life, and it becomes really unhealthy, doesn't cause you to do your best work, and just leads to a very scarce mindset. It's not a creative place to be working from. And there's just this a story of failure starts to proliferate in your mind if you let it. Of this is who I am, and it's my life's passed me by, and I'm over the hill, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not talented. All those sentences can start creeping their way into your brain. And for me, the personal happiness part is often pretty closely tied to physical health. Like, I'm a very active person, and I think it's really hard to get out of your mind by thinking better thoughts. So a lot of what I do from a physical standpoint is for my personal happiness. Like, I wake up every day and do a big workout so I can get into a good, positive, optimistic state to write. When the day is done, it's like, okay, I thought of a couple really funny ideas that I wrote down for a project that I'm working on, or I cranked out 1,000 words for a new chapter in my book. And I'm very disciplined about taking those wins and not letting my life turn into this big grand story, but just to ratchet down what happened in a day that I did well, what I could have done better. And if I can keep my life in that narrower focus, I tend to be happier. But,
yeah. Okay. Awesome. How would you, if I asked you how you define success, what would you answer?
I would define success as the ability to like yourself.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, no one's really going to remember what we did. Like, maybe your kids, your kids will be the ones that pass it down. That's cool. And we'll have various successes, failures in our lives. Maybe it'll matter, maybe it won't. But ultimately, we are left with ourselves, and we're left with the conversation in our heads, and learning to treat myself kindly and to enjoy my company is a lifelong pursuit of mine. It's a daily battle. But when I can make myself giggle and be proud of myself, and just have a more enjoyable voice in my head, then then my well-being is not dependent on the numbers on screen that I'm looking at. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Okay. Let's go forward, 30 years, 40 years. You're being interviewed by your kid. What do you want that legacy to be? What are you sharing with them? What stories? Like, what are they going to find out?
I think that the qualities I would most want to impart to my kids would be the importance of humor, curiosity, and grit. Humor, because I think when we're kids, most of us are funny. And on the schoolyard, we're all telling jokes to each other and just being silly. And then somewhere along the way, we realize someone tells us we need to be serious, and we lose that part of ourselves. And it's a death of some kind that we don't need to let happen. And it's purely a death that is the result of fear of feeling stupid for saying something silly. A joke, making a character out of yourself. There's a risk to that. You're putting a part of yourself out there that has huge benefits if you pursue that. And I've really pursued that. and that's, I can be funny. I can also be serious, and to remind myself to, whenever possible, see the humor in a situation has led to a huge amount of well-being in my life, and just joy on a day-to-day basis, and ability to make the right friends who also have a sense of humor. And it's just an underappreciated aspect, of human qualities. I think, we tend to think of things like integrity and strength and but like, man, humor is really where it's at. Curiosity, because I think that curiosity gives you permission to hurl yourself into worlds that you were not born in. And it gives you permission to continue to move outward in your life, and make connections and ask questions. And it results in a bigger universe if you can get good at asking questions and really set your sights on other people and learn to understand them. It's just a wonderful skill. And I've spent obviously a huge amount of time doing a podcast about exactly that. And then grit, because I think that life is painful for everyone. And to learn how to endure pain gracefully is a necessary skill to make it through. So whatever it takes for you, through meditation, through physical exercise, through journaling, through therapy, just understanding that when you get a human life, it's not supposed to be easy, and it's not supposed to be fun all the time. And you need to feel all of the darkness as well that comes with planet Earth, and you are strong enough to make it through. But learning what your unique toolkit is to find that grit is really going to serve you well as you forge out into your own unique pathway. So humor, curiosity, grit would be the three things that I'd want to impart.
Awesome. Good choices. Thank you for expanding on them so we really feel it and get a sense of what you're talking about. Going back to your book, The Project, who's the ideal audience? So did you already have friends, people in mind, an audience in mind when you started it? Who is the audience? And let's kind of shift back to them for just a few minutes before we wrap on making sure they know how to take this forward.
Sure. Yeah. The audience was my friends, really. It was millennials who were interested in their own emotions, their psychology, their story, and just wanted tools to be able to pull it off. A big fear that I had by writing a book called One Last Question Before You Go about interviewing your parents was that it would just be cheesy. And if we're not acknowledging the intensity of this project, it's just hard for people to connect with it. So I wrote, in that book about drug addiction and seedy subcultures, and obviously the conspiracy theories. And I feel that when you have material that can come across as a bit saccharine, oh, we're interviewing each other, this is so amazing, we feel connected. You need to over correct by being incredibly honest and real for people to want to trust you with that material. So I was thinking about my friends. There's profanity in the book. There's R-rated scenes, and I think that really helped people be like, damn, I don't have exactly this in my life, but I have some version of it, and he's at least being honest about what's going on with him. So maybe that will give me the permission slip to not feel so lonely in my own endeavor. The last thing you want is for someone to read the story and be like, yeah, but he had it so easy, I could never do that.
True.
In my life. And I mean, I had a ton of privilege in my upbringing in my family, but also I was able to talk about the hardest things. And I think that that's what made it a book that I can be proud of.
Yeah. So you did that, like, you're telling us you did that intentionally. You obviously had advisors around you and editors telling you things that you shouldn't have in there. Was there anything you really hesitated on? Either you didn't want to include it or you did.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a sexual assault scene in the end with my mom, where she talks about getting sexually assaulted as a child and how that led to some of her beliefs, how that affected her. And I didn't want to include that because it's just not something I wanted to interview her about. And I had a very well-known writer that I respected say, you need to go into the hardest stuff if you're going to write a book about it. So that other people can be like, whoa, he had the courage and she had the courage to share the story. And as a result, okay, we're going to get our skeletons out of the closet too. Which is ultimately what this whole thing is about, right? Like I would wager that the number one complaint that adult children have with their parents is that they don't really see me. And I would wager that the exact same complaint is true of parents when thinking about their kids. They just don't see me, right? And that is what this whole thing's all about, right? Like that's what AudioLife is all about. That's what your whole project is about, helping people to see each other. And that's the power of the interview. That's why you should learn this skill. Is it's like putting glasses on for the first time and connecting and getting closer. And that's hard, can be really scary, but that's also what humanity is really all about. What all these creative projects are at their core is an opportunity to be seen and feel closer to one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really well put. So you've already given a lot of tips. You've given advice. If I asked you to kind of leave the audience, let's say we have your target audience, they're ready to go and interview their parents. Like what's that advice you want to send them off with?
The advice that I would want to send my audience off with is that you have permission to be a journalist. And you can at any point step out of your role, however you see yourself, and just step into that role of journalism. And that can be with your parent, that could be with a friend, it could be with a story in your local neighborhood. But what journalism is all about is about asking questions. It's about getting curious and moving out into the world beyond yourself. And I would prompt people to take the afternoon and just be 10% more curious about the things that are right in front of them. And when they do that, they'll notice that it leads to a lot more joy, actually, because you're not so focused on yourself. And then when you strengthen that muscle, you can use that on your parents, and man, it makes them feel good. I mean, man, that's the real cherry on top of this whole conversation, is that your parents probably feel like they have a lot of stories that you have never been curious enough to ask about. So it's a real gift to them to set up an interview and give them the floor to share a bit more of themselves.
Very, very cool. Okay, if people want to read the book, find the book, learn more about you, where should they go?
They can go to Amazon and get One Last Question Before You Go on Amazon. And if they really want to make my day, they can even leave a review. But yeah, people seem to be enjoying it. It's a #1 Amazon bestseller, and people have been interviewing their parents, and they've been enjoying the story. So it's just a total dream come true for me to have been able to put this out. So yeah, hope people enjoy it and got some value out of this.
Very, very awesome. And I'll add, because as much as I love reading, and believe me, I do, I also, live a busy life, and sometimes audio works for me. So I got the audiobook.
Oh, lovely.
Go ahead. I jumped on Audible. You use whatever you want. And
thank you for getting it.
Have it play in the background. But yeah, it's, I think there's so much that, so much kind of like, I love the idea of like, put yourself in the shoes of a journalist, right? Like give yourself that role, take yourself out of maybe a real world. I love the advice about be just a little more curious. Let yourself be curious, right? Like we run hard. We maybe put blinders on, like just let yourself do it. So I think there's been a ton that you've shared in the conversation today, but there's so much in the book that's worth listening to and learning about as well. So go and do that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The audio version on Audible is really fun because it will, we were able to include small snippets of some of the interviews with my parents and with other experts who are included in the book. So you get a lot of bang for your buck in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I went backwards. So I started with the book, then jumped on the podcast, then I laughed, became a fan. So check out the podcast too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you supporting the project and for all the work that you're doing. It's making the world a more connected place.
Yeah, it sure is. Amazing. So we covered a lot today. Definitely not everything. Is there anything you really wanted to share with the audience before we sign off for today?
Go interview your parents. That's it. And if not your parents, interview parental figures, people, mentors, people who are just older than you, who have some wisdom to share. You don't need to limit this. In the book, I say use the term parent flexibly. Interview anyone who feels like a parent to you.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. I love that you're putting the mission out there, and the people are jumping on, and that you're giving them the tools to do it. So thank you for sitting in the studio with us and sharing everything that you did today.
Thank you.
Open.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
All
cool.
Right.
This has been another episode of the AudioLife Podcast. I've been your host again today, Carrie Purcell, joined by guest Kyle Thiermann. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to rate our show. It helps other people find us, and subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another story for you. Thanks, everyone.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.